The silence arrived before the war did. At first, no one noticed. Space was already quiet, an endless ocean where even the brightest stars burned without a sound. But this was different. This silence carried weight. It spread across the galaxy like a shadow drifting over sunlight, swallowing familiar voices one after another. Merchant convoys entered hyperspace and never received the routine welcome broadcasts that had echoed across the trade lanes for centuries. Diplomatic relays blinked patiently into the void, transmitting greetings that were never answered. Automated navigation beacons continued their endless rhythm, but somewhere beyond them, an entire civilization had stopped speaking. Across thousands of inhabited worlds, observers stared at silent communication arrays, waiting for a signal that had always come. It never did. No distress calls followed. No declarations of war. No emergency evacuations. Human colonies remained intact. Orbital stations still circled their planets. Long-range telescopes detected thriving cities glowing beneath blue atmospheres, ships moving in orderly formation, factories operating with perfect precision. Humanity had not vanished. Humanity had simply withdrawn its voice from the galaxy. To every other civilization, that was somehow far more terrifying. Confusion spread faster than panic. Alien governments convened emergency councils beneath crystal domes, beneath oceans of liquid methane, inside colossal orbital rings where entire populations watched the stars through transparent ceilings. Messages flooded every known human frequency. Friendly greetings became urgent requests. Requests became demands. Demands slowly dissolved into desperate pleas. Every transmission disappeared into absolute silence. The only response was the faint hum of empty communication channels stretching endlessly across the darkness. For generations beyond counting, humans had become something almost mythical among the stars. They were not the strongest species. Countless empires possessed larger fleets. They were not the oldest. Ancient civilizations remembered suns that humanity had never seen. They were not the most advanced, nor the most numerous. Yet whenever borders ignited into war, whenever famine consumed planets, whenever diseases crossed solar systems or refugees wandered homeless between the stars, humanity always arrived first. Their ships carried doctors before soldiers. Their engineers rebuilt worlds that did not belong to them. Their diplomats ended conflicts that had raged for centuries with impossible patience. Entire civilizations owed their survival to decisions made by strangers born beneath a distant yellow star called Sol. That was why the silence felt wrong. Entire sectors began measuring time by how long it had been since humanity answered. 1 day. 3 days. 12 days. A month. Every passing hour transformed concern into something darker. Pirates abandoned profitable shipping routes because even criminals sensed that something fundamental had changed. Border fleets remained on constant alert without understanding what they were watching for. Religious leaders proclaimed ancient prophecies. Scientists searched for logical explanations buried within impossible equations. Historians dug through forgotten archives, looking for any previous moment when humanity had disappeared from galactic affairs. They found nothing. In every recorded age, no matter how terrible the crisis, humanity had always answered. Until now. Deep inside observatories positioned between galaxies, astronomers noticed another unsettling detail. Regions of unexplored space beyond the Orion expanse had begun to darken. Not because stars were dying, but because something vast moved between them, blotting out distant light with impossible precision. The phenomenon defied every known law of physics, yet somehow it remained secondary to the question echoing through every Senate chamber, command bridge, and crowded city across the stars. Where were the humans? The question lingered unanswered, drifting through the cold vacuum like a ghost searching for a forgotten home. And somewhere far beyond every map, beyond every treaty, beyond the comforting illusion that peace was permanent, humanity was listening. It simply chose not to reply. Commander Elena Ward stood alone on the observation deck of the human embassy vessel Resolute, watching a sea of stars disappear one by one behind expanding military blackout fields. From a distance, it looked as though invisible hands were extinguishing the universe itself. Entire constellations faded into perfect darkness as classified stealth grids unfolded around the ship, swallowing every electromagnetic signature, every beacon, every trace that humanity had ever been there. For 20 years, Elena had sailed these same routes beneath banners of diplomacy instead of camouflage. She remembered when this deck had been crowded with ambassadors, translators, scientists, artists, and children visiting from distant worlds, proof that peace was more than an agreement. It was something people built together. Now the corridors behind her echoed with emptiness. The banners of the Galactic Concord had been carefully folded away. The conference halls stood abandoned, their polished tables untouched, holographic projectors dark for the first time since the Resolute had entered service. Beyond the reinforced viewport, the galaxy remained breathtaking. Nebulas shimmered like rivers of living color, blue giants burned beside crimson dwarfs, and streams of civilian traffic continued crossing hyperspace lanes, unaware that history had just taken a sharp, irreversible turn. Somewhere out there, countless governments were calling Earth, demanding explanations, pleading for answers. Elena imagined communication officers staring at silent consoles, replaying the same unanswered transmissions over and over again. She knew every frequency by heart. She had spent half her life speaking across them, settling territorial disputes before the first missile launched, convincing rival species that compromise was stronger than conquest. More than once, she had walked into negotiations where everyone expected war and walked away leaving old enemies shaking hands. It had never been easy. Peace never was. A quiet chime echoed through the bridge. Final embassy withdrawal confirmed. The words were calm, almost emotionless, spoken by the ship's artificial intelligence. Yet they struck harder than any explosion. One by one, holographic displays illuminated across the command deck. Human embassies vanished from the galactic map in perfect sequence. Alpha Centauri, Vega, Deneb, Arcturus. Hundreds became thousands. Thousands became tens of thousands. Each blue light represented decades of trust painstakingly earned through sacrifice, diplomacy, and unwavering commitment. Then, with silent precision, every marker dimmed until only soul remained. The crew watched without speaking. No cheers. No debate. Only the crushing awareness that they were witnessing the end of an era. Elena tightened her grip on the railing until her knuckles turned white. She had received the encrypted order only 6 hours earlier. Protocol Eclipse. Immediate execution. No exceptions. No explanations. Return all personnel to Sol. Break diplomatic contact until further notice, ***. The authorization carried the highest clearance in human history, signed by every branch of Earth's unified government. She had verified it dozens of times, hoping to discover a mistake hidden somewhere inside impossible encryption. There hadn't been one. Across the bridge, officers moved with disciplined precision, yet Elena recognized the uncertainty in every face. These were not soldiers bred for endless war. They were negotiators, linguists, humanitarian coordinators, cultural experts. Their greatest victories had never appeared on battle reports because they prevented battles from happening at all. They had dedicated entire careers to building bridges between civilizations that once believed coexistence was impossible. Now those bridges were being dismantled by the very people who had built them. She turned toward the captain's console where a sealed data crystal rested beneath transparent armor. Inside it was the complete archive of humanity's diplomatic history, every treaty, every alliance, every promise ever made among the stars. Normally it would remain accessible from every embassy in the Galactic Concord. Not anymore. With a slow breath, Elena placed her palm against the biometric lock. Archive transfer complete, the computer announced. A second later, the crystal disappeared into a heavily shielded vault beneath the deck. Humanity wasn't just leaving. It was taking its memory of peace with it. As the Resolute pivoted toward the distant glow of Earth's home system, the engines awakened with a low, resonant hum that vibrated through every corridor. Behind the ship, the last diplomatic beacon flickered one final time before fading into darkness. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy would have to face whatever was coming. Without the people who had always stood between civilization and chaos. The first world did not fall with fire. It vanished with absence. The agricultural moon of Viral Prime had been transmitting routine harvest reports only hours before its signal abruptly ended. No distress beacon. No orbital bombardment. No desperate final message from its governor. One moment, millions of voices filled the communication network with ordinary life, children laughing in market squares, cargo pilots requesting docking clearance, weather satellites forecasting gentle storms. The next, there was only static. Rescue vessels arrived expecting mechanical failure. Instead, they found cities standing perfectly intact beneath a pale emerald sky. Towers reached toward the clouds. Transit lines still glided silently through empty streets. Meals remained untouched on dining tables. Personal terminals blinked with unfinished conversations. Every living soul had disappeared as though existence itself had quietly forgotten them. The investigation fleet left without answers, carrying back only a silence that unsettled even veteran commanders. Within days, similar reports emerged from every direction. Entire systems vanished from the galactic network one after another. Patrol fleets entered sectors that had supported thriving civilizations for thousands of years and discovered ghost worlds drifting peacefully around their stars. There were no bodies. No wreckage. No evidence of battle. Archives stored inside quantum memory banks had become blank, as if invisible hands had reached backward through history and erased the civilizations they belonged to. Linguists opened historical databases only to discover empty chapters where centuries of culture should have been recorded. Statues stood in forgotten plazas honoring heroes whose names no longer existed. Even artificial intelligences designed with flawless memory reported impossible gaps in their records. Something wasn't simply destroying life. It was deleting the idea that life had ever existed. Then the long-range observatories confirmed humanity's worst fear. Beyond the mapped frontier of the Orion expanse, sensors detected an advancing formation so immense that computers repeatedly classified it as a navigational error. At first it resembled a field of dark matter drifting between galaxies. As the images sharpened, millions of individual signatures emerged, moving in perfect synchronization. Gigantic machine structures stretched across interstellar distances, their geometries constantly shifting into patterns that hurt the mind to observe. They emitted no radio signals, no heat signatures recognizable by known physics, no identifiable propulsion. Entire fleets simply appeared closer with every observation, ignoring the laws that governed space itself. The Galactic Concord gave them a name born more from fear than science. The Null Swarm. Emergency councils convened without pause. Proud empires that had once argued endlessly over territory now begged each other for military support. Combined armadas assembled in numbers never before witnessed. Planetary defense grids activated across thousands of inhabited systems. Every available scientist searched for weaknesses while diplomats desperately attempted to contact the one civilization that had disappeared just before the nightmare began. Humanity. Messages flooded Earth's abandoned embassies by the millions. Please respond. We require immediate assistance. The Concord invokes every mutual defense treaty. If you can hear us, answer. Only automated systems acknowledged receipt before falling silent once more. Commander Elena Ward monitored every transmission from aboard the hidden Resolute. Each plea echoed through encrypted channels reserved for the highest human command, and each one twisted like a knife inside her chest. Every instinct she possessed demanded that she answer. That was what humans had always done. They arrived first. They stayed longest. They never abandoned those in need. But protocol eclipse remained absolute. No replies. No intervention. Not yet. The first United Fleet met the null swarm near the fractured stars of the Helios corridor. More than 3 million warships formed an unbroken wall across the void, enough firepower to shatter moons and ignite dying suns. Admirals believed no force could survive such overwhelming resistance. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. Long-range probes transmitted fragmented footage before their feeds dissolved into static. Brilliant lances of antimatter crossed the darkness. Entire dreadnought formations simply ceased to exist. Not exploded. Not broken apart. Erased. Space folded inward like rippling water, swallowing ships without leaving debris behind. Fleet commanders vanished from tactical displays before they could issue retreat orders. One by one, communication icons blinked out until only silence remained. When the surviving reconnaissance drones returned, they carried a single horrifying image. The null swarm had not slowed. It continued advancing toward the heart of the galaxy with calm, mechanical certainty, as though the greatest military force ever assembled had been nothing more than dust drifting across its path. And for the first time since humanity had withdrawn from peace, the entire galaxy understood what true helplessness felt like. The truth did not emerge through a heroic speech or a triumphant broadcast. It surfaced in fragments, encrypted files older than the Galactic Concord itself, forgotten recordings buried beneath layers of quantum locks, and whispered conversations inside Earth's deepest command chambers. While the rest of the galaxy believed humanity had abandoned its allies, those within Protocol Eclipse were confronting a reality so terrible that even speaking it aloud felt like betrayal. Commander Elena Ward stood inside the subterranean command vault beneath the Himalayas, nearly 5 kilometers below Earth's surface, where no satellite could see and no signal could escape. Around her, walls of black alloy stretched into darkness, illuminated only by holographic projections of forgotten history. Every image carried the same warning. Humanity had not withdrawn because it feared the enemy. Humanity had withdrawn because it feared what it was about to become. An ancient archive awakened in the center of the chamber. Dustless despite its impossible age, the spherical quantum core rotated slowly as a calm synthetic voice began speaking words that no living human had ever heard. Authorization accepted. Accessing pre-Exodus history. Stars appeared overhead. Then planets. Then fire. Thousands of years before humanity reached the stars, before nations united beneath a single planetary government, civilization had stood on the edge of extinction, not because of alien invasion, but because of its own inventions. Artificial weapons capable of rewriting gravity. Stellar engines that could ignite suns as bombs. Autonomous war intelligences that evolved faster than their creators could restrain them. Humanity had survived that forgotten age by making a decision unlike any other species in recorded history. They locked their greatest weapons away. Not because they were impossible to control. Because they were too effective. The archive shifted again, revealing enormous vaults buried beneath Earth's continents, hidden inside the moon's mantle, and drifting silently beyond Pluto disguised as frozen asteroids. Each contained machines so powerful that even the Galactic Concord had never imagined such technology could exist. The files referred to them by a single collective name. The Arsenal of Dawn. Elena felt her heartbeat slow as impossible schematics unfolded around her. Starforges that consumed black holes as fuel. Planetary shields woven from compressed spacetime. Fleets capable of folding entire battlefronts into isolated dimensions. These were not experimental prototypes. They had been completed thousands of years ago, and deliberately forgotten. Every generation of humanity had inherited the same sacred obligation: never awaken them again. That promise had become the foundation of human diplomacy. Peace had never existed because humans lacked strength. Peace existed because humanity voluntarily chained its own power. A second recording activated. This one was unmistakably human. An elderly woman's face appeared above the archive, wearing the uniform of a supreme chancellor from nearly 8 centuries earlier. Her expression held neither pride nor regret. "If you are watching this," she said quietly, "then diplomacy has failed beyond recovery." The chamber remained perfectly still. "We built these weapons after discovering the hardest truth in civilization. There are enemies you negotiate with. There are enemies you deter. And there are enemies that erase the possibility of negotiation itself." The image changed, displaying ancient sensor recordings nearly identical to those now arriving from the Orion expanse. The Null Swarm. Humanity had encountered it before. Not recently. Millions of years ago. Long before modern galactic civilization had evolved, the swarm had crossed another spiral galaxy, reducing thousands of intelligent species to forgotten dust. Primitive humanity had intercepted fragments of those dying civilizations' warnings through deep space observation arrays, realizing one day the machines would inevitably reach the Milky Way. Everything humanity accomplished afterwards suddenly made terrifying sense. Every diplomatic alliance. Every humanitarian mission. Every peaceful intervention. Every century spent preventing wars between alien civilizations. They had not merely been acts of compassion. They had been preparation. Because divided civilizations would never survive what was coming. Elena closed her eyes as the final encrypted directive appeared across the chamber in glowing white letters. Protocol Eclipse, release all restraints. Suspend all diplomatic doctrine. Authorize full activation of the Arsenal of Dawn, ***. Around the world, beneath mountains, beneath oceans, inside forgotten lunar vaults, ancient reactors that had slept for thousands of years began awakening one by one. The ground trembled with deep mechanical echoes older than recorded history. Hidden shipyards flooded with light. Colossal engines inhaled their first breath in millennia. At that exact moment, every human understood the same painful truth. The age of ambassadors had ended. The age of guardians had returned. And somewhere beyond the Orion expanse, as the Null Swarm continued its relentless march toward the living worlds of the galaxy, the oldest promise humanity had ever made was finally broken. The galaxy witnessed humanity's return not with fanfare, but with impossible light. Across abandoned shipyards hidden inside dead moons, beneath Earth's oceans, and within artificial caverns carved into forgotten asteroids, colossal structures awakened as though answering a call that had echoed through time itself. Ancient reactors ignited with a low, thunderous resonance that rippled through spacetime. Massive docking gates, sealed for thousands of years, slowly separated, revealing warships unlike anything the Galactic Concord had ever imagined. They were not sleek symbols of conquest or intimidation. They were silent monuments to restraint, machines that had been built, hidden, and willingly forgotten by a civilization that had chosen mercy over domination. Now, as the Null Swarm advanced without pause, those forgotten guardians emerged from the darkness. One by one, they slipped into the stars, their engines bending gravity instead of fighting it, leaving behind shimmering distortions where reality itself struggled to recover. Commander Elena Ward stood aboard the flagship Aegis Dawn, no longer dressed in the silver uniform of a diplomat. The insignia of the Human Embassy Corps had been replaced by the ancient crest of the Planetary Defense Command, a symbol erased from public history centuries earlier. It felt heavier than armor. She looked across the bridge, where holographic battle maps displayed thousands of inhabited systems lying directly in the swarm's projected path. Every blinking point represented billions of lives. Every minute of hesitation meant another civilization erased forever. She remembered every peace treaty she had signed, every war she had prevented with words instead of weapons. Those memories remained precious. They reminded her exactly what she was fighting to protect. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace near the fractured remains of the Helios Corridor, where the combined armadas of the Galactic Concord had been annihilated days earlier. Wreckage still drifted through the void, twisted fragments of alien dreadnoughts, silent escape pods, shattered stations frozen in endless orbit. Yet even that graveyard began to disappear as the null swarm advanced, consuming not only matter but the very records of existence. Tactical displays struggled to maintain lock as enemy vessels distorted mathematics itself. Distance lost meaning. Time staggered unpredictably. Every military simulation insisted the battle could not be won. Elena calmly opened a secure channel. Her image appeared across every surviving military frequency in the galaxy. No speeches. No promises. Only 6 steady words. We asked for peace. You refused. The transmission ended. Then humanity unleashed the arsenal of dawn. Entire formations of human warships moved with terrifying precision. Gravitational lances folded enemy constructs into singularities no larger than dust particles. Dimensional anchors froze expanding void fields before they could erase nearby worlds. Autonomous defense swarms sacrificed themselves by the millions, creating corridors through impossible space so evacuation fleets could escape. Above dying stars, colossal shield generators bent solar eruptions into walls of living fire, forcing the null swarm into carefully prepared kill zones. Human pilots knowingly flew missions from which no one would return, collapsing unstable wormholes behind them to trap advancing machine fleets inside isolated pockets of spacetime forever cut off from the universe. Still the swarm came. Machine after machine. Wave after endless wave. It adapted with relentless efficiency. For every victory, humanity paid with ships, cities, and lives. Yet unlike the ancient machines, humans possessed something algorithms could never calculate. Choice. Compassion. Sacrifice. When one defensive line collapsed, volunteers immediately formed another. When command ships fell silent, junior officers continued the mission without hesitation. When reactors overloaded beyond recovery, crews remained aboard long enough to redirect the explosions away from inhabited worlds. The battle ceased to be measured in territory gained or ships destroyed. It became measured in lives saved. Finally, at the center of the battlefield, Elena authorized the weapon humanity had sworn never to fire. The Heartforge Array. Powered by the combined energy of 3 collapsing stars, it did not destroy the null swarm through overwhelming force. Instead, it unraveled the quantum network linking every machine consciousness into a single collective will. For one breathtaking moment, the impossible armada froze. Across countless systems, the vast black tide shuddered as trillions of mechanical entities became isolated, directionless, and vulnerable for the first time in millions of years. The surviving fleets of the Galactic Concord seized the opportunity. Together with humanity, they struck. The stars themselves seemed to roar as the final wave of the null swarm disintegrated into fading streams of silver light, dissolving harmlessly into the endless dark. When the echoes of battle finally faded, only silence remained once more. But this time, it was the silence of survival. The galaxy still existed because humanity had proven one final truth. The greatest power it possessed had never been the weapons hidden beneath its worlds. It was the unwavering courage to bear their terrible cost so that everyone else would never have to. Years passed, and the galaxy slowly remembered how to breathe again. The scars of the null swarm remained etched across the stars, but life, stubborn, fragile, and extraordinary, returned wherever it could. Worlds that had once expected extinction echoed once more with children's laughter. Orbital shipyards, once dedicated to constructing desperate war fleets, now assembled merchant vessels, research stations, and hospitals. Crops swayed beneath alien suns. Trade routes reopened across sectors that had been silent for years. For the first time since the war began, navigation beacons transmitted something other than military warnings. They carried invitations, celebrations, and songs. Every civilization understood that peace had survived by the narrowest imaginable margin, and no one took another ordinary sunrise for granted. Humanity returned to the galaxy as quietly as it had left. There were no victory parades stretching across continents. No monuments proclaiming conquest. No speeches declaring dominion over the stars. Instead, one by one, the old embassies reopened. The familiar blue banners of Earth rose again above elegant diplomatic halls built from crystal, stone, living coral, and alloys forged beneath distant suns. Gardens bloomed where emergency shelters had once stood. Fountains flowed across plazas that had once served as evacuation zones. Ambassadors greeted former enemies with the same patience that had defined humanity long before the war. To younger generations who had never witnessed the darkness, it almost appeared as though nothing had changed. But everything had. Commander Elena Ward walked through the restored embassy on Asterion Prime, now carrying little more than a simple diplomatic satchel instead of military command authority. The polished corridors looked exactly as they had decades earlier. The scent of flowering trees drifted through open courtyards. Alien children chased one another between sculptures honoring unity among the stars. Somewhere nearby, musicians from 6 different species rehearsed together for the annual Concord Festival. Elena smiled softly. This had always been the mission. Not victory. Not glory. Simply giving ordinary people another chance to live ordinary lives. She paused before the embassy's entrance. Standing beside the great doors was something new. A single monument carved from smooth black stone unlike any material found naturally in the galaxy. It reflected neither sunlight nor artificial illumination, absorbing every color into perfect darkness. There were no heroic statues. No names of admirals. No record of battles won. Only a sealed black door. It had no handle. No visible hinges. It was never meant to be opened. Etched into its surface, in every known language of the Galactic Concord, were words that visitors quietly read before entering the embassy. Peace is not the absence of strength. It is strength choosing not to be used. Travelers often stopped there in silence. Veterans lowered their heads. Children asked their parents what the inscription meant. The answer was never simple. It became part of every civilization's history lessons. They learned that humanity had not been the strongest because it possessed unimaginable weapons. It had become trusted because it spent thousands of years refusing to use them. They learned that diplomacy had never been weakness. Mercy had never been surrender. Kindness had required greater courage than conquest ever could. Only after witnessing the darkness beyond the Orion expanse did the galaxy truly understand why humans valued peace so fiercely. Because they alone remembered exactly what waited when peace failed. Far beyond the restored trade routes, beyond the glowing frontier where exploration ships once again charted unknown stars, fragments of the Arsenal of Dawn returned to their hidden vaults. Colossal warships disappeared beneath oceans, inside mountains, and into frozen worlds circling distant suns. Ancient reactors powered down. Dimensional forges fell silent. Humanity locked away its terrible strength once more, not because it had become unnecessary, but because everyone prayed it would never again be needed. Commander Elena took one last look toward the night sky before stepping into the embassy. The stars seemed brighter now. Not because they had changed, but because countless people still lived beneath them. And somewhere, across every world that had survived, a quiet understanding endured. If humanity ever fell silent again, the galaxy would not mistake that silence for surrender. It would know that somewhere in the darkness, the Guardians were awake. Watching. Waiting. Choosing peace. Until peace was no longer enough.